Hey guys, I'm coming back here from that video, guys. Today we have our next stadium here, which of course continues our overseas stadium tours of no clipping series. We got the NFL London Stadium. Now this is not Wembley. Wembley will be the last stadium we look at in our international tour. Of course, we already took a look at both of the one Brazil game, two Germany, Mexico City, and then we have two Londons. So this one, and we have Wembley. Now Wembley is a void stadium. It just floats in a void, so there's no outside. This stadium does have an outside and is arguably the best outside stadium we have seen. And also, a little side note, it actually has it inside to this area right here, which I thought was absolutely insane, because usually this just goes to nothingness, but for whatever reason in this stadium, they actually made it detailed, which I gotta give them a lot of props for, because that's kind of dope. Now, this is, of course, I feel like a specialty for EA, because they really like this stadium. Based on what I understand, they made the suites actually full. They made every little detail they could. Even these suites actually have TVs in them and pictures in them. Like, they went out of the way to make this stadium one of the best stadiums in Madden when it comes to international stadiums. Outside of Mexico. Mexico is probably the best, and then it's arguably this one. Which is weird, because you would think it would be Wembley, right? Wembley is a stadium I think even non-football fans, NFL football fans, well, I meant to say, even NFL football fans know of Wembley if they don't watch soccer. They still know of Wembley, and so it's kind of interesting how that is not the case. But I don't know, kind of interesting that that stadium is not the most detailed. So is this the one where you can skydive off the stadium? I don't know. I watched Tom Grossi a lot, and I know he skydived off some stadium. I thought it was this one in London, but I might be incorrect. I know he went on a tour of all the stadiums internationally, and I could have sworn it was this one, but I might be incorrect on that one. Before we get to the outside, it looks like all of these little areas here are completely solid, so you can't see through any of them. And no, there are 0 vendors in this stadium, kind of like we saw with the last couple stadiums here. Yes, there was some vendors, I believe, in the second Germany stadium, and the Mexico stadium had vendors, but the other ones did not. There are 0 vendors here, so now let's look on the outside. And again, it's one of those situations where this is a dome stadium, yet EA did add a complete outside. Now, unlike the Germany one we just looked at, which was not really much of an outside, this one is very detailed outside and is a lot bigger map than the Germany one that did have an outside as well. It's not as crazy as the Mexico one, okay? The Mexico one is insanely crazy, and that one just has more details than EA Sports knows what to do with. But this one does have, it's weird how it is structured. So the third layer out, you do have these two, just kind of like make-believe 2D image panels. But the third layer out, you do have a bunch of small houses. Looks like residential, maybe apartments, maybe shops, stuff like that, right? That's just kind of the far out. Then you have the second layer here, which is mainly just grass. It looks like some farmlands, some foliage, some houses, some buildings. But again, not much. It's literally the only buildings are over here. Yeah, literally right here, the only buildings. And then you have some over here as well. And then you have the inner circle, which is obviously where you see the roads. You see a lot more of the buildings. You got some high risers here. You got some other buildings, and these ones are more detailed to look a little bit more like London. You got some apartment buildings and stuff like that. So kind of like 3 different layers of different types of buildings here. And this is something we've seen they like to do with international stadiums, is they like to go with this design of like 3 different layers. I don't know if it's easier when they're coding it and they're, using the Frostbite engine to manufacture these maps, which again, I got a comment down below. Someone said, using the, like, they can just copy and not copy and paste. They can just use like a generator to generate all these all these buildings outside these stadiums. That's not how the Frostbite engine works. You don't just have a generator that generates random buildings. So the Frostbite engine works like pretty much most 3D animation or 3D graphics, well, it's called engines. So, for example, you have the Unreal Engine 4 and Unreal Engine 5. You also got the Frostbite engine. There's a couple others I can't think on the top of my head. But if you ever use Blender, like a 3D graphic design software, Blender is free, but it's like a very dumbed down version of what you would do in Frostbite engine or what you would do in any of these other engines. They're not just generating buildings, quote unquote. What they do is they take a cube, and what they do is they design it so they like make a cube, and then they go ahead and make a house out of it. So imagine like you take a cube, you can warp it in different ways to make a structure. Then they texture the structure by connecting it to a singleized texture file. So for example, you might say, okay, well, I want to have this rectangular cube right here, right? They'll make this as a single unit. And then they'll say every single unit that looks like this, I want to have this exact texture file connected to it. So it's pretty much like a PNG file that's connected to it, and then they can put them different places around. So they still have to structure it and put them in different places, but it's not too difficult to create the structures like this. It's actually pretty easy. It's just they have to place them different places, which takes some time. And yeah, so again, like for example, this one probably started off as a normal cube. Then they scaled it down to make it more of a rectangular box. They probably added the top of it. They connected a texture file to that. They connected a texture file to the front of the actual unit, and then and all the sides. And when you imagine like each of these stadiums that have an outside, I don't know, maybe they have like 50, 60 buildings. This one right here is a small map. It might have 60 buildings, right? That's 60 times they have to do that for. Now imagine doing that all 32 stadiums with how big like MetLife and the Packers Stadium is, and then times that by 32 with the international stadiums as well. So again, this is why I give EA a lot of credit, because what they're doing is not that difficult. But again, you just take a cube and you're like moving around and changing the size and everything and just connecting texture files, but it's time consuming. That's the one thing about 3D animation and 3D blend and with Blender or anything you're designing, whether you're designing games or you're designing actual, real life animations, is just time consuming. Most stuff like this is not difficult, but it is definitely time consuming. And it's one of those situations where it takes forever. It really takes a very long time to do, which again, like I said, always, EA does not have to do any of this. They could just literally say, hey, listen, there's your stadium, there's a void. Done. They go out of their way to do this. But tell me down below your thoughts and opinions. I'll see you guys next one. Peace.